we see something moving on the hill above. That is,
It looks like a person.
it does not look like a person. Its arms are way too big. Look at how long the hands hang down to the...
How can you see from there down to his knees at least, aren't they?
Bigfoot doesn't exist, or at least that's what they want us to believe. You see, for thousands and thousands of years, there has been so many reports of these creatures being sighted all over the world. Those who believe in the existence of Bigfoot, the Yeti, or similar cryptids point to this sheer volume of anecdotal sightings all across cultures and continents as some sort of compelling indication that there might be some undiscovered species of creature with the skills to evade possible capture. Now, the question of Bigfoot's existence simply goes beyond the physical or scientific realm. You see, various traditions and belief systems endow these creatures with supernatural qualities that could possibly transcend zoological classification. Bigfoot legends have deep roots in Native American folklore, often portraying them as some sort of mystical keepers of the forest with spiritual connections to nature. In fact, even certain modern accounts describe witnessing paranormal behavior or qualities during Bigfoot sightings. Could these be beings that move between the metaphysical and the physical realm? In fact, let's take one of the most notable Bigfoot accounts of all time, the Eric Shipton photograph. Now, Eric Shipton's photograph is easily one of the most iconic sightings, or should I say photographs, just because of the time and nature surrounding it. Taken in 1951 up in the Himalayan mountains, Eric photographed a footprint that is believed not to be human. Due to the nature of this photograph, it has fueled so much skepticism and arguments about the truth of what it could be. Could it have possibly been an animal or a human? Or was this something else, like possibly a Yeti or even a Bigfoot? But to fully understand the entirety of the photograph and the context behind it, we need to understand a little bit about who took it. And that, my friends, was British mountaineer Eric Shipton. And it was during this time in 1951 that Eric was up on an expedition up in the Himalayas, never expecting to find what he did or even thinking of encountering a Yeti or a Bigfoot. I'm sure at that time, a creature like this wasn't even on his radar. And if we look at this photograph, the actual measurement of the print is 13 inches. And of course, it's very possible it could just be a human print that got distorted in the snow, because we know that can happen. But the issue is you have to take into account a size 13 foot up in the Himalayas barefoot. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but let's look a little further. Eric's speculation on the entire thing was that it wasn't human, and that he was convinced that it could be a Yeti or abominable snowman, or so that was his take. And with Shipton being a part of the first few expeditions to scale Mount Everest and K2 in the 1930s, this is a man who had been in this environment quite often, so he knew when things looked out of place. Now, I might just be giving him far more benefit of the doubt here, but I'm trying to be on his side. Now, of course, we have to look at the rational side of things as well. We can't just look at this photo and assume that it was automatically a Yeti, because chances are it could have, like I said prior, been a distortion of someone's footprint in the melted snow, or possibly another animal, even a bear. But unfortunately, even that, what the skeptics claim, is inconclusive. But I can tell you this, folks, is that this photo alone, for years afterwards, propelled multiple expeditions and searches for the truth of the Yeti or the abominable snowman in this area. I also just want to say that Eric wasn't just some mountain climbing rookie. I mean, this was a man who had years and years of mountaineering experience. He's seen a lot of things, he did a lot of things, and to him, this was probably something that really stuck out of place. I mean, you think back in the 1950s, I'm not too educated on what kind of photography equipment they had to lug around, but, you know, compared to nowadays when we just got to pull up a phone, well, they didn't have that luxury back then. It seemed like they had to do a lot more to get a good picture, and of course, you know, you got to look at the viewfinder and try to get the right shot, and you don't know what it's going to be because you got to print it out. I digress. What I'm saying is, I really don't think that he would have taken taken the time to take this shot if he wasn't sure that it was something abnormal. I also want to make the distinction here that, to my knowledge, he never came out, took the picture, and said, hey, these are Yeti tracks. From my understanding of what happened, he saw the prints, saw that they were strange and out of place, and decided to take the picture, and it seems like later on, that's when it became speculated that it could be something not human. And ladies and gentlemen, at the time in 1951, he was kind of a big deal in the mountaineering social circles, particularly the Alpine Club and the Royal Geographical Society, which are both very big clubs. He even authored several books on the subject and was very well known for his honesty and his experience up in the mountains. So you think with a guy of this caliber of skills, I'm pretty sure that he would have been able to distinguish bear prints or, human prints that would have been distorted in the snow from something that was definitely not supposed to be there. Now, again, I'm not saying that these are indeed Yeti prints, but they do seem unexplainable. In fact, there has not been a single conclusive piece of evidence for this particular picture to this day. And up next, we have what is referred to by many as the Independence Day Bigfoot. Well, now why is that? Because back in Northern California in 1988, this video was taken. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. It was shot in 96, but was released to the public in 98. The story goes that some anonymous group of men had gone down to this particular river in California, the Six Rivers National Forest, if I'm not mistaken, and this is where the magic took place. What they caught that day, folks, was some large, hairy, bipedal creature retreating off into the woodline as they rolled their cameras. And similar to the Patterson and Gimli film, it turns its head to look back at the camera and then vanishes for good. Now, having this kind of footage, you can only imagine just at the time how viral this would be. I mean, sure, mainstream science and media would not accept it, but within the cryptozoological community, it became a hot debate of whether this was completely fabricated or if this was real evidence for this supposed creature. In fact, at the time, many considered it to be some of the best footage, hands down, ever captured of this thing. Now, there seems to be a little bit of controversy over the actual date it was filmed. Some claim that it was October 20th, while the majority claim that it was shot right around Independence Day due to the timing and the name of it. But it appears that if you look at the video and analyze it just a little bit better, and if you look at the foliage and the plant life, it seems just a little too inconsistent with that of what you would see in October right as fall is coming in hard. And already, generally when you have really good footage of something, the majority of people consider it too good to be true, and all things begin to point towards a hoax. Now, skeptics, of course, for this particular clip have the right idea. I mean, they're thinking, how is it that you just have such convenient timing that they're able to get such clear footage of this supposed creature when all these other people are out in the woods, hunters, explorers, park rangers, etc., are not getting that same chance to catch something so clear and concise. Now, like every other piece of Bigfoot footage out there, it matches everything to a T. Shaky quality, low quality. I mean, this is back in 96, so it's not like they had 4K cameras. And the footage was just far too brief and lacked any substantial follow-ups, which of course raises some massive red flags. I mean, think about it. If you were out in the woods and got footage this good and you were that close to something, don't you think there would be follow-ups? I mean, it just seems off. However, on the other side of things, there are many people in favor of this being real that claim no, the muscle movement, the overall movement of its body, the biomechanics, all point to this being a real, living, breathing primate. And they go even further to claim that this is genuine footage. In fact, this footage alone is still hotly debated in some circles, and unfortunately, like everything else, remains inconclusive to this day. And that, folks, brings us to number 3, the Provo Canyon Bigfoot. Back in October of 2012, a man by the name of Beard Card, what an interesting name, happened to snap this video back in the Provo Canyon in Utah in 2012. Now, what we're seeing here in the video is a large bipedal, dark thing of some kind. Now, what's great about this one is even though it only lasts just for a few seconds, it actually does a pretty decent job capturing the body and face. But again, like everything else that's on video or pictures, it was met with a lot of skepticism, and people began to question whether the authenticity of the footage was even real and just how credible and or reliable that beard really was. Now, from Card's perspective, he swore up and down that he had no motive to hoax this. He was not looking for fame or notoriety. He was just sort of taken aback by what he just happened to capture on camera, which is why he was so shocked when it happened and began showing it online to several people, wanting to know if is this a Bigfoot? Like, what is it that he captured? He wasn't sure. In fact, he even went on to do several phone interviews with different news stations talking about what he had filmed. Now, I want to insert something a little more personal here, is that kind of just looking over his case and looking at what he was trying to do with the video and once it was out. And of course, this is just my opinion. It didn't really come off that he was trying to really gain notoriety from it, which does give him a little more credibility, but of course, it's hard to say for sure. Some people just like to hoax things and throw it in their little circle of friends or potential viewers and then kind of go from there just to see if they get a bite. So anyway, like all the other videos, it does remain a mystery of whether or not this was genuine footage or not. I will leave it up to you, the viewer, to ultimately decide. This, my friends, is the next one, number 4, the Allegheny National Forest Bigfoot, or you could just call it Allegheny for short. Now, this photo is interesting because it was taken back in 2007 by a hunter known as Rick Jacobs. Now, the Allegheny National Forest, which is in Pennsylvania, also happens to be a hot spot for what people claim are portals and witchcraft and occult rituals taking place, as well as a host of other cryptid sightings like the Mothman and the Crawler and Dogman and Bigfoot and all these strange beings supposedly seen out in this forest. And so while there is no necessarily substantial evidence to support that claim, there are a ton of anecdotal stories that do kind of lean more into that, which is interesting. Now, while its face is kind of obscure, we can see other portions of its body, right? And this does kind of fall into play with the other video and pictures that we've seen. Now, Jacob's claim is that this being was roughly 75 to 100 feet out off in the distance, and he was able to snap this picture before it walked off and moved away. In fact, he went on to claim that this thing was easily, estimation of course, 8 feet tall, if not more. Now, this is a picture that wouldn't gain notoriety right away, right? So he took the picture in the fall of 2007, roughly September. However, it wouldn't be to the following, 8-9 months later in May of 2008 at a Bigfoot conference in which this photo was shared that it would start to gain some traction. Just like many of the other videos and photos, it quickly became a debated discussion, many claiming that it was great evidence for this creature. And of course, it wasn't just like someone trying to, create a hoax party, where a bunch of people go out in the woods and they just happen to find it. They figured that Rick was actually a hunter. He was genuine. He had nothing to gain off it. It had been at least 8 or 9 months since he shot it, so they figured this must be the real deal. But as people looked deeper into it, he was, of course, met with a lot of skepticism, and rightfully so, because there is a lot of hoaxers out here. Specifically, skeptics pointed out the forward-leaning posture, while others kind of were like, hey, this looks like a person in an ape suit. You're really trying to pull off the whole this is a Bigfoot thing? I don't think so. There were other breakdowns done on the image that concluded that there was manipulation, photo manipulation that had gone on, and that this was more than likely a person in a ape suit or a Bigfoot costume, and that it was slightly tweaked and edited, probably in Photoshop, to make it look like it does. Now, even after Rick Jacobs was met with his skepticism and claiming that he had faked the photo, he of course denied these allegations, but due to the nature of the sighting and the little evidence he had, he could not provide further authenticity for what he took. And in fact, beyond the photograph that he took and his really tiny account of just being out in the woods hunting and, it being out 75 feet away and taking the photo, he pretty much provided almost zero information regarding his account or any follow-ups. I mean, really anything to help his case nothing. But it gets a little more fishy. Apparently, his claims had shifted over time. At one point or another, it was said that he apparently had no knowledge of Bigfoot prior to the sighting, and yet supposedly at some other point in time, he claimed that he had suddenly remembered that he had a sighting as a kid. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel that if I had a sighting of something like this as a child, well, you really wouldn't forget it, especially as nonchalantly as that. What I also find very interesting is that Jacobs apparently refused to share the original digital JPEG that came from the camera, and instead insisted on only sharing the prints. And of course, if you look at the photo, the face is conveniently obscured. And in fact, investigators even came to Jacobs demanding that they wanted him to take them to the exact location that it happened. But apparently he couldn't remember, he failed to do it, he kind of had a rough idea of where it happened. This is just a case of just a ton of inconsistencies on Jacobs' end, and so things don't look really good. In fact, even paranormal experts, if that's even a real thing, actually got a chance to interview Jacobs on multiple occasions, and even they claimed that his claims of what he took and just his general storytelling and credibility, well, you know how his case is looking already. Let's just say that there was some serious doubts expressed over this photo, I'll put it that way. And while this photo was never outright claimed as a hoax, he never outright admitted it, things kind of lean more on the hoax side, but again, it's still inconclusive like everything else. This next one is rather smelly, because in the same state in Johnstown, there was a really interesting account. Apparently in spring of 1980, a 17.75-inch footprint was discovered near Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Now, the man who discovered this was a man by the name of David Slagle. Oh, excuse me, his name was Dennis, not David. Now, this wasn't just another, oh, I done found a Bigfoot print, we gonna take a picture. This one was unique because this particular print, ladies and gentlemen, aside from the size, had this nasty, foul, sulfurous odor connected to it. And it stunk so bad, it even became known famously as the Johnston Smelly Bigfoot. And so, of course, before time ran out and weather got to the print, plaster casts were made. And ladies and gentlemen, this seems to be legitimate, the real deal. The cast itself does seem to show ridges and dermal lines that are consistent with what many claim to be primate biology, particularly foot anatomy, actually. But the story gets more hairy. Because just a little bit before, although it was never exactly specified how soon before, but Slagle apparently encountered some really stinky, disgusting, hairy creature in the woods behind his home prior to finding this footprint, and he believes that the print belonged to this thing. And of course, the skeptics argue that, in terms of the cast, there's not that much dermal ridge detail, hardly if at all. And that while looking at it, it doesn't seem to match the other specifications of other Bigfoot prints and cast. So what gives? Now, in my opinion, this is probably one of the more interesting cases just because not only did he find a print, but he apparently had an encounter, a face-to-face encounter, prior to getting the print. But unfortunately, with so little detail to go on, we know what happens, folks. It remains inconclusive. Now, this last one I'm going to share with you guys today is probably one of the most interesting. And as a matter of fact, this wasn't done by just some guy who wandered off into the woods and happened to have his camera handy and just happened to see a Bigfoot and get the footage. No. This was done by a man by the name of Paul Freeman, who claims to have well over 45 Bigfoot sightings. Now, you're probably saying the same thing I am. If you've had that many encounters and you have very little evidence to show for it, what gives, right? Come on, throw us a bone here, come on. Now, I'm not saying he's full of it, but I'm also not completely defending him. I mean, you'll understand why. Back in 1994, he claimed that he reportedly saw some sort of 8-foot ape-like creature out in the woods, actually specifically the Blue Mountains in Washington state. Now, if you want to get more specific, apparently he saw this thing at a creek in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest. For those that want a little bit more geography, the Gifford Pinchot actually isn't all that too far away from Mount Adams and Mount St. Helens, which, by the way, are huge, supposedly paranormal UFO hotspots with a lot of weird stuff surrounding them. Everything from underground lizard people to the Lemurians to UFOs abducting people. You understand the severity of this. Now, to Freeman's claim, he was actually able to observe it for several minutes at roughly about 90 or so feet away before it turned around and disappeared. His description of this thing was that it was massive with a cone-shaped head, long dangly arms, and just a massive thick linebacker barrel body. Now, he was so astounded by his own work that he wanted to share it at Bigfoot conferences and other scientists and even skeptics and prove that, hey, there is such a thing as Bigfoot, and in fact, it's inhabiting the Blue Mountains. Now, right off the bat, many people were so skeptical of this guy because, again, here's a guy who is claimed to have over 45 different sightings and encounters, and apparently he had a host of photos, but they were all conveniently blurry. Now, I know the whole taking a photo of Bigfoot and the situation and, being full of adrenaline and all that, I know we could take that into play, which I'm not going to in this video, but it really just seemed that Freeman was in this for financial gain and notoriety amongst his community. And in fact, many deemed him not credible at all as a witness, therefore pretty much nullifying any sightings or evidence he ever had. Now, aside from the many photos of blurry creatures, he apparently has photos of nests and footprints and other Bigfoot-related activity. Now, the thing that I find kind of fishy is that it seemed that he failed or just refused to give proper details in order for a full investigation to be launched. Now, what I mean by that specifically is he would never tell anyone the specifics of where a certain encounter happened. It was always vague and minimal details at most, or he somehow conveniently had trouble memorizing exactly where it took place, which I don't know about you guys, but that just seems like a huge red flag. He was also accused of very questionable methods, to put it lightly, like staging evidence and leading people to purposefully staged sites of an encounter, supposedly. Apparently, when approached by journalists and people wanting to poke the sightings more, he was very evasive about it. And to others, apparently his information would change and shift over time. It's just the whole thing seemed pretty shady. Now, I know a lot of people out there who are chasing Bigfoot and trying to get prints and evidence. I know that these aren't necessarily scientists, but it just seemed like he did so very little, if anything, to substantiate his ridiculous claims or even prove that he wasn't a hoaxer and that he wasn't in it for financial motives. But of course, in terms of PR, it's kind of genius, right? You come out, you say you had 45 sightings, you show some photos, you kind of get some talk amongst you, but it turns out you got a self-published book. So, maybe it was just a giant marketing PR campaign. It's hard to say. I do think it's interesting, though, that Freeman himself seemed, and he made this public, that he was disappointed from the lack of notoriety he received from all of his supposed sightings and how little that it translated into profit and book sales. Now, sadly, he passed away back in 2003, and hoaxer or not, it's always sad when someone dies. Now, unfortunately, no other evidence has come to light in recent years to prove or verify any of his sightings and pull him out of the hoaxing zone. Because more than likely, ladies and gentlemen, while his accounts and his claims are interesting, he's probably full of crap, but again, it's inconclusive. Now, I want you all to understand something here today. I only cherry-picked 6 different Bigfoot accounts that have some sort of video or photographic evidence, I guess you can call it, right? But there's actually something to show. Like I do with every other episode, I like to just show you guys and present the information, and I keep my personal opinions about the evidence to myself, and I like to let you guys be the judges. Is it completely false, or is this true, outstanding evidence for the unknown? Now, I will say this, the sheer volume of anecdotal stories, and not just pertaining to Bigfoot specifically, but to all these other strange things. And again, not pertaining to just cryptids and creatures, but the whole umbrella of the supernatural. It's just staggering how much there is. And in fact, there are many indigenous tribes spanning hundreds, if not thousands of years of stories of these creatures. And in fact, to a lot of these tribes, these creatures are just as matter of a fact as a bear or a deer in the woods. It's just something that you don't even question exists. They're just there. And even if you go onto a lot of these tribes' reservations and talk to these people, you'll find out that the majority of them have some sort of experience. And if not with Bigfoot or another creature of some kind, they do have something to say about the supernatural. And ladies and gentlemen, more often than not, they are believers. And then if we look at the thousands of acres of just untamed woods where animals could hide and go away and never be seen, well, you kind of have a recipe for something that's not normal. Now, I will leave you with all of this. On one note, it's very interesting that science can't prove the existence of Bigfoot, but it also can't disprove it either. Interesting. And in that note, ladies and gentlemen, the true authenticity of all the photos and videos that you've seen today in this video remains a mystery. And because you guys have made it this far into the video, I want you to all comment down below, "I believe," so that way I know who made it to the end of the video. And if you guys enjoy this kind of content, be sure to go ahead and smack that like and subscribe button for more from yours truly. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll catch you guys in the very next video.